Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah, I'll take that as a yes again. Okay, so we're here today. There's actually two of us talking today. So we're here today to talk to you about the UK European Consumer Centre and the future for cross-border consumer advice and assistance. So it'll be myself and my colleague Elisabetta talking today. So I'll go first and Elisabetta will speak after me. And we'll talk to you about all things ECC and what the future might look for us. So just a bit about me. I'm the supervisor here. I manage the advisor team. I'm also in charge of customer service. I've got a degree in law and I've got about 15 years worth of consumer protection experience. I've been working at CTSI now for about 13 years, and before that I worked in trading standards. So a bit about how today's going to go. Once both Elisabetta and I have spoken, we'll then open the floor to questions. If you have a question whilst we're talking, it might be worth waiting till the end, just in case one of us explains the answer to you already. Just as a reminder, keep all your microphones on mute if you can, whilst we're talking. That will just save any interference. So we'll just carry on. So just as a bit of an introduction, the UK ECC, we provide free and impartial and non-judgmental advice and assistance to consumers who have a complaint against a trader based in another European country. We're part of a network actually of 30 centres, so that's one in every EU member state, plus Iceland and Norway, and of course the UK. And once the transition period ends on the 31st of December this year, the UK ECC will no longer be part of the network, and going forward, our future remains unclear. We currently receive funding from both the European Commission and BEIS, but at the end of this year, the funding that we get from the European Commission will end. And we're one of the busiest centres in the entire network, so our service, losing the UK ECC, will mean that all those consumers won't be able to get the assistance that they need to resolve their complaints. And on average, we deal with around 12 to 15,000 cases per year. But we'll have a look at those figures in a little bit more detail later on. So the service we provide is first tier consumer advice, but we also go that bit further and provide informal mediation too. Often our cases are resolved after providing the first tier advice, but if not, we can get involved in the case and make contact with the trader on behalf of the consumer. We often receive complaints from consumers based in countries outside of the EU too, or complaints from UK consumers who have bought goods and services from countries. We're familiar with the laws in other countries, and we have an awareness of how the processes work of resolving a consumer complaint. We have relationships with other consumer bodies, and in some instances we can share those cases with those consumer bodies in the hope that we'll get a resolution for the consumer. That's always our aim when we handle our cases. So if the service that we provide were to cease at the end of the year or the end of next year, then there's no other organisation that could take over this function. So as a bit of a background, you may think that we're a big organisation with lots of staff and it's really busy. It is busy, but there's actually only 7 advisors. So 7 advisors providing advice to thousands of consumers every year. So we started in 2007 with only 2 advisors, and they both had a background of working in consumer direct. And now we have 7 advisors, and even then they're not all full time. So these 7 advisors handle the cases from consumers all over the world, but mainly in the UK. So we also handle cases that are referred to us from our counterpart centres in the rest of the network. So in all 29 other countries of the network will send us cases. So for those of you who work in trading standards, you may have already heard from us regarding traders based in your area. And that's because we commit to informing trading standards of problems or potential problems regarding traders in their area. And that sometimes resulted in enforcement action as a direct result of our intelligence. We provide first tier advice to consumers that get in touch with us, and this involves advising on the and the practical steps that they can take in order to resolve their dispute. More often than not, the first tier advice that we provide is enough for them to get their dispute resolved. But if not, and the problem still remains, we can refer it to our counterpart office in the relevant country where the trader is based for them to make contact with the trader. And this is informal mediation, and as such, we have no authority to enforce the law. We can't compel a trader to resolve the dispute, but we can remind them of their legal obligations, and that often results in a positive resolution. Customer service is actually really important to us too. After all, there's no point having the legal knowledge if you can't advise a consumer in a way that the consumer will understand. We've grown in this area too, and since 2014, we've held the Customer Service Excellence Award. And CTSI now also provide external training on customer service too, and it's actually our team who deliver that training. So just if you, this is what our advisors look like. if you've had any dealings with us over the past 13 years, you're likely to have spoken to one of these guys. They're trained to a high level of UK, EU, and even some international consumer law. Before our advisors take on cases, they receive one-on-one training on the law, the types of cases we handle, and they receive training in handling calls and emails too. We can attract more highly qualified staff, and the majority of our staff have law degrees. Some of our staff even have trading standards backgrounds. This has the additional benefit to consumers as we're able to make a legal assessment of documents and give advice on complex cases. Some of our cases can take a long time to handle, and that's due to their complexities, and we have the time and the patience to be able to go through everything with the consumer. And generally, our team has a wealth of legal knowledge and experience in UK, EU, and international law. We have specialised knowledge in certain trades and industries that other advice bodies, and maybe even enforcement bodies, may not even have, such as car hire, air travel, and timeshare. Over the years, our team have seen so many timeshare and car hire contracts, and this has increased our knowledge on the law surrounding these areas, and it helps us understand the practical steps that a consumer can take to resolve their case. If the service we provide were to cease, there is a real threat to our jobs too, and 13 members of staff, including the 7 pictured here, could be made redundant. So once the transition period has ended, consumers will still be shopping cross-border, possibly without even realising, like we do now. For example, Amazon are based in Luxembourg and Ryanair are based in the Republic of Ireland, but both these companies are household names within the UK. We're the only advice and mediation service that handles cross-border consumer disputes completely free of charge. If our service were to go, consumers would have nowhere to turn to for advice or assistance in the event of a cross-border dispute. So as already mentioned, we have in-house expertise on certain areas, and timeshare is one of those areas. We can assess documents, including terms and conditions of contracts and even ancillary contracts, such as finance agreements. And we can look to establish a legal breach, or at least explain in layman's to the consumer what these terms actually mean. So in addition to providing first-tier advice and mediation, we can make legal assessments and provide that extra bit of support to consumers. And again, if that service were to cease, that role is not going to be replicated by anyone else. And if we cease to function at the end of this year, it would not be possible to start up again mid next year, as the staff we have now already have the years of knowledge, experience, expertise and specialisms, and that's behind each and every member of staff. And to have some form of cross-border resolution service past this year, it will need to continue. We won't be able to stop and then start again. So cross-border enforcement, I'll go through some examples of where we've passed on intelligence to trading standards in the hope of a result, and also vice versa, where we've passed it on to other countries too. So at the moment, if there's any enforcement concern with any trader we deal with, regardless of what country they're based in, we have knowledge of the appropriate channels to share the intelligence with the correct authority. Sometimes we're the go-between between enforcement agencies based in different countries. Sometimes trading standards will get in touch with us to pass on information to their counterparts overseas. We have a relationship with the CMA, who are the UK's representative on the Consumer Protection Cooperation Network. We are able to share intelligence with them on potential scams or rogue traders based in other countries of the EU. They are then able to share that information with their counterparts in the respective country. There is a possibility that without the UK ECC involvement in sharing intelligence, dodgy companies abroad may be able to continue in their activities. Sometimes rogue traders will actively target a certain market of consumer in a certain country. So I'll give you an example. There was a company called Scentmore. They were based in Bulgaria. They had a website selling cheap perfume, which either didn't arrive or when it did arrive, it was counterfeit. We know that they were targeting UK consumers as their website ended with .co.uk, prices displayed were in pounds, and everything was in English. The trader was based in Bulgaria, so trading standards would not have even been aware of this company. But we were able to report this company via the CPC network, and the company were eventually closed down by the Bulgarian authorities. Soon after they closed down, a similar business opened up from the same address and carried out the same activity. As soon as we became aware of this trader, we were able to spot the early warning signs and report them again. They were swiftly closed down for a second time. I don't have the figures to hand, but there was a huge UK consumer detriment here, and we had received a large volume of cases from consumers, which were all eventually resolved. And another example of our cooperation with enforcers is a company called Infern. This particular company were based in the UK. They sold furniture online to consumers, but targeted their sales to France, Germany, and Austria. We know this because of the language used on their website, the currency displayed, and the websites all ended with .fr or .de, which led you back to the .com address. So we received cases from our counterpart offices in the relevant countries quite rapidly, so arranged a meeting with the local trading standards. The main issue here was delays in delivery, and when consumers complained, the trader would refer them to their terms and conditions, which stated that delivery times were approximate and that the consumer acknowledged that the furniture was bespoke and therefore the order was non-cancelable. We identified that the items were not actually made to the consumer specifications and therefore not bespoke for the purposes of the law. Therefore, if there was an unreasonable delay in delivery and the consumer didn't agree to wait, the trader should be cancelling the order and giving the consumer a full refund. So we met with the trading standards, who contacted the trader, who committed to putting things right. We set up a complaints referral system where we could send them the consumer complaints quickly and efficiently. This went on for around 18 months, but eventually we were able to get refunds for thousands of consumers. So trading standards weren't aware of this trader until we brought it to their attention. And that's because the consumers weren't based in the UK. So had we not raised this with trading standards, that trading standards department would not have become aware of a potential problematic trader in their area, and those consumers would not have received their refunds. So in addition to providing a free first-tier advice and mediation, we also advise consumers on what their options are should they decide to take their case further. If our involvement is unsuccessful, or the consumer wishes to pursue the trader further. One of these avenues is ADR. I'm sure you've all heard of ADR. So being part of CTSI, who is competent authority on non-regulated ADR bodies, helps us forge relationships with ADR bodies. Having a relationship with these bodies helps us understand their individual processes, and we can pass this knowledge on to consumers. Sometimes we're able to act on behalf of consumers when liaising with ADR bodies. So effectively, when a consumer passes us a case, from the moment they send in their documents to us, they can rest in the knowledge that they don't have to do anything with their case and that we will do everything we can in order to get it resolved. And if we can't, we're in a position to advise them of whatever options they have. So in addition to the ECC work that we do, we also provide a helpline for the ODR platform. So this is an online platform that connects consumers to ADR bodies. So if any user, so that a consumer or a trader, has a question about the platform, they can contact us and we can help them navigate their way around the platform. Our knowledge and expertise around ADR helps us in this area. We also have knowledge on the European small claims procedure and can give consumers advice on going to court. So our assistance goes all the way from the initial first tier advice all the way to the court stages. And customer service, as I mentioned earlier, it may not be at the forefront of an enforcement body's priorities, but it's important for the provision of advice to consumers. After all, if a consumer cannot make sense of the advice they receive, then really what was the point? They could have just read the legislation themselves if they wanted the legal jargon. So customer service training can also go hand in hand with business advice, as some of the legal requirements of a business is basic customer service, such as adequate staff training, correct pricing, correct description, and shop signage. But because we believe customer service is important to consumers, we've invested in training all our staff, not just our frontline advisors. Customer service is inherent in the work that we do, and we want to ensure that consumers are getting the best from us. We already offer so much to consumers by way of the advice, expertise, and knowledge and specialism that we have. So we want to go one further and ensure that we're doing everything we can for consumers. And that's where the focus of delivering high quality service comes in. The results even speak for themselves. We have a customer satisfaction rate of 85%, which is not bad for an organisation that has no enforcement powers. So we do this not only with the regular training, but we have stringent quality checks in place and use call recordings for training. The staff have regular meetings with their managers to ensure that their work is of a high standard and continues to be of a high standard. Customer service related objectives are set in staff appraisals, so we can ensure a high level of customer service is maintained constantly. And in 2014, we decided to go for the Customer Service Excellence Award, and we achieved it then and have maintained it ever since. It's an annual audit. And for those of you who work in local or central government, you may have heard of the old charter mark. Well, CSE is a replacement of it. It's basically the same thing. So as of this year, we've taken our customer service in-house training and offered it externally. We can offer an online only training course, which we're in the process of making, but it will be ready in the next couple of weeks, that you can undertake in your own time, or we can offer trainer-led training delivered virtually or at the premises. Offering the training online and making it generic will help us deliver the training to all types of companies, all types of industries. And at the moment, we're the first place that a consumer will turn to or be referred to when they have a complaint with a trader based outside the EU. Think about the times you've encountered a problem with a trader outside the UK or outside the EU. You've probably got in touch with us because that's a natural choice to handle all non-UK inquiries. Now, we do endeavour to help all consumers to get in touch with us. That could just be by way of signposting to another organisation in the relevant country, or it could be by actually giving some legal and practical advice. So we've ventured into handling non-EU cases where a UK consumer has a complaint against a company based outside the European area that we cover. So my colleague Elisabetta will be talking a bit more about these non-EU cases and the agreements that we have with other organisations. So, well, that's me done. That's my email address. If you have any questions, if you didn't want to ask today, if you wanted to ask afterwards, that's my email address. So I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to my colleague Elisabetta.
Thank you, Sonia. Hi, Sonia. Can you see my presentation? Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
I can, yeah.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sonia. Hello, everyone. My name is Elisabetta Sciallis, and I am an accredited mediator and arbitrator and dual qualified solicitor in UK and Italy. Previously, I worked as a lecturer in enforcement and as a public prosecutor. I'm also the CTSI lead officer for cross-border affairs, and I am one of the contributors of the CTSI think tank report on Brexit. Today, I would like to introduce the work of the CTSI's contact center service. So my presentation is divided in three parts. The first one is about the functions of the UK ECC Centre and how it operates as part of our contact center services within the ECC network. The second one is about what are the threats and opportunities for the UK ECC given the EU exit, and our plans for leveraging our skills and expertise to develop and expand an international dispute resolution center. So, what are the CTSI contact center services? Well, there is the UK European Consumer Centre, the Online Dispute Resolution, the European Consumer Centre for Services, with the oldest one being the UK ECC, which was established in 2007. Whilst providing consumer advice in cross-border disputes, one of our strong points is the provision of second-tier advice for consumers. This means that we follow the consumer disputes all the way from our first contact to its resolution. This also means that whilst dealing with a case, we are also facilitating UK traders in resolving disputes with consumers. And we achieve this through a highly trained and specialist staff. We have also built up strong relationship with our counterpart centers and other stakeholders, which further enhance our capabilities and our reach. I will talk about how these links can also facilitate our work for at the international level in a moment. The UKECC is the UK centre within the ECC network of centres. There is at least one consumer centre in each of the 27 member states, plus Iceland and Norway, and of course us. Combined, these 30 centres can handle cross-border disputes between any two countries within the EU. We provide advice and support to UK consumers with a complaint or a dispute to resolve within Europe, and facilitate EU consumers with complaints against UK traders. Generally, across the network, the ECC that is contacted by the consumer works together with the ECC of the country where the trader is based. This requires the UK staff to have a good knowledge not only of UK law, but also European legislation. And this allows us to also resolve differences between EU laws in a practical way, when not fully covered by harmonizations of laws. Additionally, UKECC duties include the analysis of consumer complaints and contribution to policies and consultation papers for international and national government. We also notify local enforcement officers about problematic traders so that local authorities know about them. We inform consumers of alternative ways to deal with their complaints, such as the use of alternative dispute resolution schemes and the European small claim procedure. UKECC is one of the busiest centres in the network. These slides show the general trend in the complaints and inquiries that, as a network, we have received since 2010. We have had a steady increase year by year, and as you can see, in 2019, we have helped more than 120,000 consumers. Despite the uncertainties surrounding the EU exit, this has also presented the UKECC with a number of opportunities. Our day-to-day work over the last few years has been facilitating consumers obtaining redress between a set of highly harmonized regulations. The EU exit looks to break many of these legal givens, replacing them with potentially complex and uncertain arrangements due to legal divergence. So cross-border consumers are likely to need even more our support going forward in order to navigate through a diverging laws and regulation post-Brexit. So the UK ECC team, therefore, has an even larger role to play in helping to facilitate consumers during this uncertain period. The principle is that consumers should continue to feel confident to enter contracts between the UK and the EU by knowing that, in case of problems, they would find an established set of organizations which can deal with their disputes, also after Brexit. Ineffective means of redress could have an adverse effect on consumers' confidence, which can result in fewer cross-border transactions taking place. This is not only from UK consumers for EU transactions, but also EU consumers wanting to buy from UK businesses. So it affects the market as a whole. The UK ECC can step in to help navigate consumers and traders to avoid and also resolve disputes due to this divergence. We have the proven capacity to do this from the current COVID-19 situation. Since the lockdown, various EU member states have responded with different emergency regulations, which take priority over well-known and established consumer rules. These measures have been adopted to safeguard interests within the individual EU member states, but the measures have led to a significant amount of regulatory uncertainty, particularly in a moment where consumers need it the most. Imagine the case of traveling or buying goods and the discussion between a refund or vouchers. The way ECCnet have responded to this situation has been very effective. By liaising with colleagues from counterpart center, we were able to quickly resolve disputes and give advice to consumers in need. This type of work requires specialist expertise. Some of our cases have an extra level of complexity in terms of volume, number of parties involved, legal details, documents, etc. Considering the UK geo-proximity and trading volumes with Europe, the main focusing efforts of the CTSI Contact Centre are to preserve our strong relationship with the EU centres, and this is our first and foremost aim. So is to continue offering cross-border support, but in addition, there is scope for the development of an international relationship with other consumer organizations too. This picture comes from a CMA workshop I attended some time ago. It wants to illustrate the national and international consumer landscape and our position in the map. I don't know if you can see, it's over here. Shows that UK ECC is an established organization with strong working relationship with a number of critical organizations, which go well beyond the regulatory minimum in facilitating the resolution of UK consumers. Our connections are both created to respond to consumer support requests in the course of the years, but also for the need to support the consumers. What I mean is, our collaborative routine activities include signposting consumers to national organizations, providing data for enforcement authorities, and because of our frontline consumer cross-border role, we are in the position to understand when laws are lacking or a particular market is more affected than others. Also, we routinely report on potential gaps in legal framework for policy organizations and market analysis through consultation papers and ad hoc requests. So, all in all, we provide an invaluable tool to assess and test new laws as we hear the way they work in reality. We have a wealth of data, and we share this with the right organization to prevent consumer detriment and for the consumer's advantage. So for this reason, we have a link with most of the organizations represented in this picture, and our ambitions is taking us a step further with the non-EU project. So a little bit about the non-EU project. Regarding our future outside Europe, CTSI Contact Service have already started opening up discussions with the global consumer networks for cooperation in resolving consumer trade disputes. I'm taking this project forward, and the aim is to create close working relationships with consumer organizations around the world for cross-border disputes, basically in a similar way that we have established with the ECC network. We understand that a closer joint working between consumer bodies is essential in order to address international challenges in consumer protection, particularly now when we are open to trade globally. Through CTSI, we have signed a number of memorandum of understandings with Japan and Korea consumer organizations, and we have an informal agreement with New Zealand. And based on this, we have already a number of successful cases. Also, we are currently in discussion to form a formal cooperation with further consumer organizations across 3 continents. We have demonstrated what we can do with EU countries, and now we feel confident that building on our expertise and experience, we can use our unique skill set to establish a dispute resolution with a global reach. The non-EU project mission is very similar to that of the UK European Consumer Centre. Our vision is to work strategically to enhance positive outcomes for our consumers through expanding our working relationship with the international organization and striving to reach a comprehensive geographical coverage for the benefit of UK consumers, but also for the benefit of EU consumers wishing to make cross-border purchases from UK businesses. The idea is to stimulate trade, support e-commerce, and not only, by making sure the UK consumers will feel confident in shopping with non-EU countries as when they shop locally. How do we aim to achieve this? Similarly to the UK ECC, by providing consumers with the knowledge of cross-border consumer law and, when necessary, to help consumers to resolve their disputes in a timely manner and in an efficient way through the representation of traders' local organizations. We see our services as being particularly relevant for particular sectors. What I mean with that? The ECC net is limited in its scope to deal with traders based in the EU. So, in case of passenger rights, for example, despite the Regulation 261 on compensation for flight cancellation and delays applying to UK and EU citizens, ECCnet currently cannot contact the airline if their airline is based outside the EU. However, by using the non-EU network, we will be able to fill up the gap and provide a more comprehensive service for consumers. This graph illustrates the distribution of cases that we have received from consumers from non-EU countries. The graph shows the top 10 countries with the highest number of cases based on where the consumer is located. This is out of 250 plus cases we have received from more than 50 countries worldwide. These figures are just, and they want to be just indicative, because this data come from the ECCnet database. So cases coming from non-EU countries are not encouraged in any way because they are outside the ECCnet remit. We have this data because as a European organization, foreign consumers are contacting us from all over the world. And sometimes because, that's my guess, that the trader is based in the UK, and sometimes because of the language reason. So as regards volume and type of cases, it is very much early days to know actual data, but I wanted to provide you with some sort of rough idea of the potential countries where we might receive most of the cases. Now, this slide shows the complaints by sector for those 10 countries identified on my previous slides. So it is indicative of the sector from which we are likely to receive the highest amount of complaints per country. So, for example, the type of complaints that we receive most from consumers based in USA are largely related to transport in the first place, then restaurants, hotel and timeshare, and then as a third level, recreation and culture. For Australian consumers, complaints are for transport and miscellaneous goods and services, followed by items of clothing and footwear. Basically, this is just to give you a rough idea of the complaints from non-EU consumers by sector. Now, this is the other way around. As in, the slides gives you the idea of the top 10 countries within whom UK consumers have the most complaints. Again, as I mentioned in my earlier slides, this is just an indication. China is at the top, followed by the United States, Switzerland, Turkey, etc. This information is important for us in order to help prioritize with which organization to start a discussion to make sure UK consumers can find a resolution of cross-border disputes also outside the EU. Again, these are the UK European complaints from those 10 countries split by sector. The colors show the different sector as a percentage of the total complaints for each country. Again, this want to be indicative, so indicative of where the UK consumer may require our help and support. As regards, for example, China, almost half of the complaints we receive from UK consumers is related to clothing and footwear, followed by miscellaneous goods and services, and then recreation and culture. For the USA, almost equally the complaints we receive is related to miscellaneous goods and services and recreation and culture, followed by transport complaint. And Switzerland, which is our third country, mostly is recreation and culture, followed by transports and then miscellaneous goods and service, etc. This slide is from the Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker website. It gives a similar format to my previous slides, but it is from the perspective of USA, Canada, and Mexico. The 3 countries, they are represented by the Better Business Bureau, and it regards scams. The data is from the period between January and August 2020 this year. So the UK is notable in that it generates 83% of cross-border cryptocurrency cases and 56% of cross-border investment scams. And it shows that also large organizations such as BBB have the need to resolve cross-border complaints with the assistance of UK organizations. Recently, we attended an online workshop organized by Korea organization. In all, 15 countries worldwide have attended the workshop. Aims were to enhance communication between the various representative bodies in the network and convincing an international dialogue with new potential partners in order to share best practices and find common ways to resolve mutual issues and the explanation of individual redress mechanism for consumer protection. We have heard of a rapid increase in the number of e-commerce shopping and a parallel increase of support requests. Also, similar COVID-19 requests for assistance and same problems as in UK and Europe. A range of processes have been presented from international partners. Many organizations use different types of complaints handling and dispute resolution methods, mediation, arbitration, etc., as well as their legal representation of consumers directly in court. The findings of this workshop will also help us to forge new working relationship with non-EU organizations. This has already been a fruitful event in terms of our exposure and also in understanding the types of cases that they need to be dealt with at international level in those countries involved. Consumer disputes resolution works when the organization set to help consumers are working well together. So currently there are challenges not only for consumers, but also businesses and enforcers alike, which in turn creates barriers to the resolution of disputes. What I have understood from my experience in building up our ODR platform is that whilst there might be a high fragmentation of bodies or remedies behind the scenes, consumers do not need to know the details. The importance is to provide a clear path towards the resolution of their disputes. In other words, the CTSI Contact Center can be the gateway for consumers to access the bodies and organizations, both EU and non-EU, which will facilitate the resolution of their disputes in the most efficient way possible. We can sort of pave the way for consumers' redress before the trade negotiations arrive or whilst they have been undertaken. That's why strengthening partnership across the consumer landscape is one of our priorities. Now, so to conclude, reciprocal arrangements are critical to the effectiveness of cross-border consumer disputes. The mission is to use the EU expertise and experience we have to work internationally to resolve consumers' disputes, encouraging trade and contributing to raise standards for case handling and developing consumer policies and help enforcers to protect consumers from harm. And this is in the EU and also globally. So this is my last slides, and I basically take your time for, thank you for your time, and I think we have time for questions. As you can see, there is my email address, and please send me your questions or your requests to this email address. I think now, Sonia and I, we can stop sharing slides, and we can actually answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. Hello.
It's Glenys Brown here, Highland Council Trading Standards. A very interesting talk and very informative. I just wondered what your thoughts were about the Internal Markets Bill that's been recently introduced and what impact that might have on your way forward. You've obviously doing an awful lot of thinking and planning ahead, but that was sort of a curveball that's been thrown at everybody at the moment. So I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I think it's difficult to say, because one thing we found with Brexit is that there's so many twists and turns, and it's just been a huge roller coaster from the very beginning. So we've come to learn to not get used to doing anything in a certain way, because we're just going to go ahead and change that. So what we've started doing is just waiting until we get some sort of confirmation from anyone and then make a decision going forward. So as you know, like for example, last year, we were supposed to have left twice last year, weren't we? In March and October. So that didn't happen, but we were prepared each time. So this time we've left, and now we've got transition period, so we know that this is happening. But what we don't know and what remains uncertain is what happens next year. So that's still in the process of being thrashed out. So it's not really about what's going on in Parliament, what gets fed back to us, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, I understand. It's just an admiration. You've got to actually have to keep your eye on the ball all the time as you're doing this planning, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes, and absolutely, it's a little bit of a roller coaster, if you can imagine. And it's yes, a political, a legal, a socio-economic roller coaster, and it's for, you know, we are all in the same boat. Definitely, there are all problems. So if we are talking about the consumer perspective, then quite important too, because as I said in my presentation, there is a set of processes, a set of consumer infrastructure. There is basically what we used to have for years, and the consumers and us have basically accustomed to all of this. There may be a risk. So for us well, for us or for consumers, for everyone, is a little bit of roller coaster, a little bit of a scary situation, in the sense that we are on a edge of great opportunities, but at the same time on an edge of cliff with regards to consumer legal protection, both with substantive content maybe not in the short term, maybe in the long term, when there is divergence, and so a set of rules that might be different from in the next few years. But what I wanted to highlight most is a set of infrastructure in place for consumers. The European small claim procedures, or the European order for payment, or lots of things that the consumer can currently use, they might not be able to use after the transition period. That is something that is an actual risk, and as it stands currently, consumers can use a European small claim procedure, for example, up to December and not beyond that. And then afterwards, it will depend on individual national laws, and also the fact that the UK signed with various conventions, saying, for example, the Hague Convention more than others. So, yes, it's quite
It's become very complex, isn't it? It's become a very cluttered landscape, really, for people to navigate around.
Yes, yes, and that's why we need that our role in distinguish various national laws is actually quite critical. As in, we've been doing this for many years. I understand that consumer laws are harmonized for most part. However, there are still different implementation of directives, and we have been able to navigate this very, very well. And that's why, in a way, leveraging our skills in that and sort of becoming a little bit of a getaway to let consumers access this service, or the service, or the EU market as a whole. That is basically our main point, or main target, if you want. Yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Are there any other questions? No, well, okay then, it looks like we'll have to leave it there. Elisabetta and I have both left our email addresses for you, so if you do have any questions, if you think of something later on, then feel free to drop us a line. We'll be more than happy to help you. Definitely. But all that's left to be said is enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you
for listening.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.